What's the difference between the Maoist mass line and the Trotskyite transitional program? Very good question, Travis. You guys are asking me good questions tonight. That's good. I'm answering them. If anyone else has any more questions, I see that there's, I answered the Rumble rant, but there's 3 more of these. This is 3, and there's 2 more after this. But if you got any more questions, keep me talking. That's what the second half of the show is for. So the mass line, if you read Mao's Little Red Book, the revolutionary practice that Mao engaged in was this idea that you go to the masses of people and you find out what they want and you give it back to them, right? You find a way that you can offer it as the Revolutionary Party. You become the champion of what people already want, but in a way that puts them at odds with the system, right? The peasants want land, right? Well, they want land, and so you form a revolutionary army that will redistribute the land. The people want democratic rights, so you form a mass organization that fights for democratic rights, right? I mean, it's like what the people already want. You find out what they want, but then you give it back to them in a way that you become the leader, right? That's basically what the mass line is. It's from the masses to the masses, leading while learning and learning while leading. And that just basically means that, as Mao said, the masses are the water and the revolutionaries are the fish, right? That what the people, we're among the people, we know what the people want, and we are organizing a movement that will deliver what the people want. That is the mass line, and it is an understanding, and that also in a revolutionary context, in a factory, in a workplace, in a community, you look for you divide everyone into 3 categories. You divide them into the advanced, the center, and the right. Right? And that you want to recruit the advanced to be your friends. You want to neutralize the center, meaning they won't oppose you. And then you want to isolate the right. Right? And that's the method for organizing. Right? That if you're building a union in a factory, you want to recruit the most advanced people to join your union. You want the people that are kind of indifferent to not really stop you. You want to neutralize them, to have them not fear you or whatever. And then you want to isolate the people that are against the union. Right? That's the mass line. Right. And that's Mao's method of the mass line. Right. And it's brilliant organizing. Right. You find out what the people want and you organize in a way that only you can give it to them, that your leadership will give them what you want. You're among the masses, learning while leading and leading while learning. And then you divide the people that you're organizing into the advanced, the center, and the right. You recruit the advanced, you isolate, or you neutralize the center, and you isolate the right. That's the mass line. Now, the transitional program is a concept that Trotsky developed, which is that, and it's true, that if you look at actual revolutions that happen, and this is true, Trotsky's technically right, but he translates it in a way that's not right. But if you look at actual revolutions, often what actually brings communists to power is not communism. All right, the Russian Revolution. Why did the Bolsheviks win? They win because everyone just got won over to communism? No. They won because they were the anti-war party, and they said peace, land, and bread. And they were the big political party that could offer peace, that could offer land, and could offer bread. And nobody, there was no other major force that could offer it. And, most people wanted peace. Most people wanted land. Most people wanted bread. And the communists, the Bolsheviks, were the big group that could deliver on it. So they came to power. Right. And that peace, land, and bread was what you call a transitional program. It was something that challenged capitalist power. The capitalists wanted to keep waging the war. The people didn't. The capitalists wanted the land for themselves. The Bolsheviks wanted to redistribute it. The people were starving. The Bolsheviks wanted to seize the food warehouses and distribute the food among the people. And peace, land, and bread wasn't full communism, but it was 3 things that challenged capitalist power. So it was a transitional program. And if you look, I've many times on these streams read the 14 points that, that brought Kim Il-sung to power in North Korea, right? This is the selected works of Kim Il-sung. And if you look at what actually brought the North Korean government to power, it wasn't full communism. It was a transitional program that was actually, that included a lot of pretty mild seeming things. Hold on, I've read it on here many, many times, but 21 point platform of if you look at the 21 point platform that the Korean Workers' Party took power on, right? 1946, the 21 point platform. It's a transitional program. It's not full communism. It's 21 things that they could offer. That, if we come to power, we will do these 21 things. Liquidate all remnants of Japanese rule, strictly ban fascist and anti-democratic activities, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of religion, the right to form local committees, equal rights to all citizens, regardless of economic status, sex, religion, or property. Protect by law the property of citizens and their possessions. Abolish all judicial organs set up by the Japanese. Develop industry, transport, and the people's welfare. Nationalize big enterprises, transport services, banks, mines, and forests. Allow and encourage free handicrafts and private industry among handicraft trades. Confiscate land belonging to the Japanese and redistribute it to the people. Fix the prices for living necessities. That's like food and other things people need in order to live. Set and establish, limit the prices so they can only go so high. Institute a system of equal tax and a progressive income tax. Institute an 8-hour workday in factories. Institute life insurance for factory workers. If they get killed on the job, their families get compensated. Create an educational system, a compulsory education system for children and colleges. Develop the national culture, science, and the arts. Set up special schools on a wide scale. Encourage scientists and artists in their work. And increase the number of state-run hospitals. And that's it. That's it. Right? Now, all of that doesn't sound like a revolution, right? But these are all things that only they could deliver, right? They were the only party that was saying, they were the only force that was saying, we will seize all the property of Japanese collaborators. We will allow freedom of religion. And so it was like, vote for us. This is what we'll give. And it's not full communism, but it's what we can offer. Right. And that the idea of Lenin and the Party of New Type is that very few people are capable of becoming full on communists. Right. Communism is a very complicated, crazy ideology. Very few people are capable of that. Most people will vote, however, for a party that is going to improve their lives and will deliver the things that they want. So so at the time that a revolution happens, at the time that you're on the brink of taking power, right, where you're big enough that you can become the new government, the way you get people to go along with you is that you come up with what you call a transitional program of things that you will do, and if they go with you, they will get, and the other guy won't do. And that's how you get people to go with you in the moment that you are on the brink of a revolution. Right? And that's called a transitional program. Okay. It's things that, when you're big enough that you can actually take power, you put forward, hey, if you bring us to power, we will do blank. And it's things that you can do when you take power, and that people who are not communists, who are not sure who to support, they'll look at you and they'll say, well, he's going to redistribute the land of Japanese collaborators, or, well, they're going to end the war. I'll go with them. Right? That's what a transitional program is. Now, generally, communist organizations have 3 types of demands. They have minimum demands, maximum demands, and transitional demands. Right? And yes, our 4-point program is a transitional program. That's what it's intended to be. The minimum program is just basic stuff that doesn't really change society, but, protects people from the worst, right? We want the wages to go up. We want freedom of speech, release the political prisoners. Minimum program is just basic stuff that is bettering the conditions of the working class or protecting the working class from capitalist attack. Stuff that doesn't really change the nature of the system, but we're for. The maximum program is full communism, creating a communist society that is eventually transitioning to a stateless, classless world. A transitional program is something that you can build a mass movement around in order to take power. Now, Trotsky, the flaw in Trotskyism is that Trotsky argues that basically, if you read Trotsky's tactical writings, he argues that the way that the Bolsheviks acted in July of 1917 is the way you should act at all times. And that is not true. If the situation changes in 24 hours, the tactics must also change in 24 hours. In July of 1917, when the Bolsheviks were on the verge of taking power, they put forward their transitional program, Peace, Land, and Bread, and they called for all power to the Soviets to create peace, land, and bread, and they built a coalition on that, and then they eventually took power. Okay? But there were other times where the Bolsheviks did very different things. And Trotsky's position was you should always build a transitional program. You should always be trying to unite all the different labor unions and socialist groups, and you should never align with any capitalists. That was Trotsky's line, was that you're fighting for the independence of the working class. You're trying to unite all the socialist groups around your transitional program, and you want independence. You want to align with no capitalists. That's what the Bolsheviks did in July of 1917. In July of 1917, they were trying to unite anybody who would join with their support for, peace, land, and bread. They were trying to break people off from supporting different factions of the ruling class. That's what they were doing. However, it should be noted that a big ally of the Bolsheviks were the capitalists who wanted to do business with Germany and the German government. And no one denies that. At this point, everyone admits Lenin got money from the German government and that there were a lot of Russian capitalists who also wanted to do business with Germany. And they were saying, hey, the Bolsheviks will end the war. They supported the Bolsheviks. And then the Bolsheviks aligned with the provisional government to defend it from the Kornilov reaction. So again, Alexander Kerensky was the leader of a capitalist government, and they protected him from Kornilov. So this idea that the Trotskyites have, Trotskyism as a tactical orientation, it basically argues, the analogy that I argue is it's like, imagine that you had a door, and there was a door, and this door would be unlocked for 1 minute every day, but you didn't know what minute it was. And so you just stand by that door constantly with your hand on the lock, trying to wait for that 1 minute where it's unlocked. And then if you're there, you can open the door and walk through it. That's the Trotskyite understanding of tactics. There's a correct thing that you do under all circumstances, and it normally doesn't work. But then every so often, you'll get to that revolutionary crisis, and you'll do exactly the right thing and say exactly the right magic words, and then the door will be unlocked and you can walk through it. If you just do exactly what the Bolsheviks did in July of 1917 all the time, at one point we'll reach what they call a revolutionary situation, and it'll work. Well, that's wrong, because if the Bolsheviks didn't have a huge organization first, it wouldn't matter what they called for, right? The reason that them calling for peace, land, and bread enabled them to come to power was because they had a huge organization and they were able to be a force that could actually take power. And it was understood that if they were brought to power, they could deliver on it. But if they didn't have a mass group first, it wouldn't matter, right? And again, there are many different tactics that one uses in building a revolutionary movement. And the idea that there's this permanent tactical orientation, that's what I call the permanent tactical orientation. The idea that in all circumstances you do blank, and then magically at some point you'll get to a situation where it works. That's not true, right? Right? I mean, that's just not accurate. And there's a lot of people, and that it's almost like religion, right? It's like if we just keep repeating the magic words, eventually, Jesus will return and everything will be set. Well, religion is for religion. It's great for religion, but it's not for politics, right? The Bolsheviks, the first thing they had to do was build their revolutionary organization. And then they had to put themselves into a position where their revolutionary organization could grow by aligning with some capitalists. And then they aligned with other capitalists. And then they strategically got themselves into a position where they could actually take power. And then, under those circumstances, they offered a transitional program and they took power. Okay? And that was the right thing to do. But the Trotsky, he used the transitional program to criticize Stalin, because after Trotsky was out, when Stalin was under the leadership, Stalin, he launched what was called class against class, right? The Sixth World Congress of the Communist International, 1929, or 1928? Yeah, they had the Sixth World Congress. And the Bolsheviks and the Soviet Union and the Communist International, they mobilized the world communist movement to oppose the Social Democrats, to call out and condemn social democracy. Well, Trotsky says, well, that's wrong. We should be trying to unite with the Social Democrats around a transitional program. No. At that point, the Social Democrats ran all the major labor unions. The Social Democrats were the main voices of socialism, and they were against the Soviet Union, and they were holding back the revolutionary energy of the working class. So it was correct in 1928 for Stalin to mobilize the world communist movement to oppose the Social Democrats. That's not a transitional program. Going around and calling the Social Democrats fake socialists, right? Going around and urging workers to oppose the Social Democrats, going around and organizing, unemployment councils of desperately poor workers to go and fight for their rights, working to organize the unorganized workers who weren't in unions, rather than trying to infiltrate the unions that were run at that point by the Social Democrats. Tactically, that was correct at that time. It wasn't a transitional program, but at that point, the Social Democrats were the main threat. The Social Democrats were holding back the revolutionary movement. There had just been a capitalist crisis. It was time to build a mass revolutionary working class movement, to build the unemployed councils. And what the communists did during what they call the third period, even though it wasn't a transitional program, it was an all-out effort to expose the Social Democrat leaders and reformists, and it was an effort to mobilize desperately poor, hungry people to fight for their rights. That was correct. And then, in 1935, after Hitler had come to power in Germany, after you had the threat of Nazism, after you have big fascist movements that are threatening to take power in various countries, the Seventh World Congress, Stalin and Dimitrov organized the working class to do what? To build a united front against fascism. And that means aligning with some capitalists. And that's not a transitional program, right? You're not breaking working class independence. You're aligning with some capitalists. Well, it was still correct, because capitalism at that point was in the midst of the Great Depression, a long-term capitalist crisis. It was leading toward fascism and war. And the communists were at the center of a struggle that included many people from many different classes who rejected fascism and war. And with their communist ideology, they understood why capitalism was leading toward fascism and war. And fascism at that point was obsessively anti-communist and anti-Soviet, and it was correct, right? And if the situation changes in 24 hours, the tactics must also change in 24 hours. Communists generally have a transitional program, they have a maximum program, and they have a minimum program, right? And arguably, a transitional program is the most effective program if you are building a mass working class movement. And the Center for Political Innovation, we have our 4-point plan, and our 4-point plan is a transitional program, right? It is 4 things that wouldn't necessarily lead to socialism, but it's 4 things that the masses of Americans want, and that and we're trying to mobilize people around those 4 things, and they challenge capitalist power. However, there may be times where we decide that it is necessary to focus on exposing reformist socialist leaders. And there may be times where we see a really big division in the ruling class, like, Lincoln, versus the slaveholders, like Roosevelt versus the fascist opposition, where we may align with them. And the situation must always be assessed based on what is happening in that moment and what will advance and build the revolutionary organization on the road to eventually taking power. And Trotskyism simplifies that to say one must always do what the Bolsheviks did in July of 1917. And it doesn't matter if you make any progress, and it doesn't matter if you're growing, and it doesn't matter if you're building a base among the population, as long as you keep chanting the correct magical incantations, you keep standing there and turning the doorknob, at some point, you'll enter a revolutionary situation and everything will work out. And that is not a correct tactical orientation, right? Mao's mass line is a much more sensible interpretation, which is finding out what the masses of people want and finding a way that you can give it to them. And, learning from the masses while leading them, leading the masses while learning from them, right? The masses of the water, the revolutionaries of the fish. This is an overall correct understanding. We develop tactics and policies based on being constantly in touch with the masses. Trotsky's transitional program is taking some aspects of a correct program, and it is largely a recipe for building a sect, because that's what Trotskyite groups tend to be, right? The Spartacist League. Are they ever, do you think the Spartacist League is ever going to become a mass party? Do you think millions of working class people are going to join the Spartacist League? No, they're not aiming for that. They don't care, because in their minds, as long as they say the correct thing, as long as they have the correct political line, they'll never see any progress. There'll be a tiny group, and then one day, magically, it'll just all happen. That's magical thinking, right? The Workers' World Party, a lot of these groups, they have it in their minds that if they follow the transitional program, if they put forward exactly the right transitional demands, they try to unify the socialist groups around a program, and they don't unite with any capitalists, but they only unite, with the workers, and they have this magical, and they try to unite all the different socialist groups. Left unity, that's a big part of the transitional program with Trotsky's left unity, right? We got to unify the socialist groups around our transitional program. We're going to get the social democrats and the anarchists and all of them to unite around our transitional program. If we're always putting forward this transitional program to unify all the socialist groups, and who cares if we ever make any progress? Who cares if we ever recruit anybody? As long as, we're doing that, then one day the revolutionary situation will arise, boom, and it'll work. And that is delusional thinking. It is delusional thinking. A transitional program works as a way to build a movement. A transitional program, I'm not against a transitional program, right? Our 4-point plan is a transitional program. And every revolution that has ever happened has been won on the basis of a transitional program. And a transitional program is a great way it's probably the main way a socialist group should agitate, right? If you go to people and just say communist revolution, they're going to think you're crazy. And if you go to people and you just say, 10 cents more an hour, they're going to not learn anything from it. A transitional program is probably the most effective way to organize ordinary people. Okay, you might get people that are very intellectual and all that, want to learn about communism, right? And if you're trying to build a block with liberals and stuff, you might organize around the minimum program, because that's something they'll see that you're effective organizers for the minimum program or whatever. But ultimately, a transitional program is the most effective way to build a mass movement. But a transitional program is one tactic. It's one tool in the toolbox. And if you're serious, you must constantly be going back to the toolbox, going back to the drawing board, and seeing what works as you try to build a more and more effective organization. And the mindset of a sect, right? And this is very, very important, right? If the Sparts ever became that large, they'd split into 4 parties and disrupt each other's meetings. Exactly. But the point is, right, that a sect says, we're not growing, we're not recruiting, we're not expanding, we're not making any progress. That's fine, because one day there'll be a great apocalypse. That is George Sorel. That's what George Sorel preached. That's Sorelian syndicalism. Doesn't matter if we see any progress. Doesn't matter if we're expanding our influence. We can just keep doing the right thing. We stick with our magical principles, and then one day it'll all just magically work out. That is not scientific thinking, and it's not a recipe for building an organization. That's a recipe for building a cult, right? That's basically what you build. You build a little cult of people who memorize the magical phrases, and they go out and they keep doing it, and you just say to them, look, someday the angels will come down from heaven. Someday the meteorite will hit the earth, and everyone will see that we're right, and it'll all work out. And that is not a serious organizing strategy. What if the revolutionary situation arises and you don't have any support? You've never built any alliances. No one's joining you. Well, then you're fucked, right? I mean, what if the revolutionary situation arises and there is a mass socialist party and it's led by reformist elements? What if a revolutionary situation arises and socialism is at this point viewed by the majority of working people as what the very things they're mad about are made up of? I mean, there's about 1 million things that could go wrong. And the idea that if we just keep beating the same old dead horse, we just keep beating the drum, just keep a steady drum beat, just keep saying the same slogans, and then one day it all just magically works out. That's not how things work. And that sometimes you have to get sectarian and expose your political enemies. And sometimes you have to enter broad united fronts and unite with capitalists and unite with leaders of the system. And you have to assess what you will do in any given situation. And I agree, I guess, in a sense, with a transitional program. I mean, we have a 4-point plan, which is a transitional program. That a transitional program is probably the best way to conduct mass agitation. Right? If you agitate for communist revolution, people think you're crazy. If you agitate for things that just sound like what the Democrats are for, you don't stand out. So I agree in that sense with the transitional program. But the idea that that's all we can do and that's wrong. And I hope that I'm making sense. These are not, the tactical question is a very important question. How can we actually win? How can we actually win? How can we get from where we're at to socialism? That is a very important question. And the transitional program, the minimum and the maximum program, the question of the united front, these are important questions. These are very, very important questions. And CPI, the Center for Political Innovation, was formed on the basis of understanding that the tactical orientation that the overwhelming majority of the socialist movement has is wrong, right? And it's wrong, right? And I would say the primary tactical mistake that is made by anti-imperialist forces in our time is movementism. They assume that the way to be a revolutionary is to take over the movement. And by the movement, they mean the left. Whatever activisty lefty people are doing, we become the king of that. We reserve the permit. We set up the stage. We get to be in charge of whatever activisty liberal people are doing. And that is our revolutionary orientation. And that is a recipe for failure in our times, primarily because activisty lefty people are more pro-war and anti-Russia, more in favor of tech censorship, more in favor of silencing people and canceling people, more defenders of the status quo than the masses of people are. And so that orientation of we want to become the bosses of liberal, lefty, activisty people, that orientation at this time is completely wrong, right? And I saw that. CPI started these broadcasts. This is broadcast number 718, but from broadcast number 1 all the way right up to now, the entire orientation has been out of the movement to the masses, meaning that what they call the movement, the activisty liberal left, is not where we should be recruiting. We need to win over the bulk of the population. And the main error that I see communist and leftist and socialist groups make is that they decide that the movement needs to be their home, and pleasing and satisfying the movement is the way to grow. And they are wrong. And they are absolutely wrong. The main thing that we should be doing is going to people who've never heard this message before and doing everything we can to not sound like liberal activisty people that they find annoying, and presenting our politics and explaining why these wars that they are opposed to are happening, explaining how, putting forward a program that would improve their lives economically, and pushing a message that is in favor of them, that says we want to make your life better, we want to strengthen our communities, we love our country, and we need to oppose Wall Street and its low-wage police state and its drive for war. Right? That is the message, right? And the orientation of the Workers' World Party, of the PSL, of most of the left, is that they want to build the movement, build the left, have left unity, be part of the movement. And that is wrong, right? And there are other orientations that we can get into, support the Democrats, vote for the Democrats because the Democrats are stopping fascism, whatever. There's a lot of problematic tactical orientations, but the entire premise of CPI, out of the movement to the masses, is that we do not want to be part of the left. We want unity with the masses, not unity with the left. I've been asked many times. I think at the first CPI conference we had in Austin, Texas, there was a guy, I think he was with Jacobin magazine, and he got up and his only question was, what is your position on left unity? And I gave him an answer. And I said, I don't want left unity, because left unity, right? In order to get the Party of Socialism and Liberation and Democratic Socialists of America and the Communist Party USA, in order to get these irrelevant groups that no one has ever heard of all into one group, you would have to accommodate all of the things that have kept them irrelevant. You would have to adjust what you do in order to make them all happy. And in the process of doing that, your potential for ever building a mass movement would be eliminated. All of these groups are small and irrelevant and fringe for a reason. And they have been around forever, and they have never expanded. And so if you were to somehow get them to all merge into one group, it would mean having to accommodate and do everything you could to accommodate all the things about them that have kept them small and fringe and irrelevant. And so you can't do that. Right? And this has been the premise of what CPI was about from the beginning. I must say, there is a certain individual who I will not name who was with CPI when it started, but he never watched any of our broadcasts. He never read any of our books. He was useful in some other ways. He was like a friend. And at one point he broke with CPI, and he tried to wreck CPI and all of that. And he tried to take a lot of members with him, and he did a huge amount of damage. And, it was just unbelievable what this person did. But I heard about, there were some people that were talking to him and still in CPI and stuff. And as CPI continued, he was trying to talk to people, and he's still trying to whisper to people and all of that. And I heard from these people what he was trying to do. And he was literally trying, he had it in his mind. He was going to form a group that would unite all the communist parties. And it was going to be like, he said it was going to be like the First International or something. He was going to be the new boss, and he was going to unite all the communist parties, and they would all elect delegates. And they would go to some foreign country where they would all elect delegates, and they would have a Congress. And I heard that. I'm like, this guy never knew what CPI was about. At no point have we ever tried to get PSL and CPUSA and DSA into the same room, right? Gavin, you took the words out of my mouth. Every 18-year-old who joins an American socialist group gets this brilliant idea that all the socialist groups are going to merge and that he or she is going to make it happen. Exactly, right? That's like the first thing that every young socialist thinks. And trust me, if that was possible, it would have happened already. And at this point, it's not desirable, even if it was possible, because all of those groups are irrelevant. So if you got all of those groups to emerge, you would get one big irrelevant group instead of 20 irrelevant groups. We want unity with the masses, not unity with the fringe irrelevant left, right? And that is a founding principle of CPI. And yes, everyone who comes around, every young socialist thinks that they're going to unify all the socialist groups. And CPI has always been premised on the idea that the socialist groups suck and that we need to have a completely different approach. And that's why we wave American flags at our rallies. That's why we wear suits and ties. That's why we are friendly toward religion. That's why everything we do is designed to not sound like them. Everything we do, right? From the tone of our rallies, the pledge of unity, the flags, the 4-point plan that will make America better and make America a stronger country. Everything we do is designed to not sound like them because the American people have seen them and don't like them, right? And yeah, merge with the masses, not the fringe. I'm repeating myself, but it's like this is so important. This is so central to everything we're about. And so if people don't get that, they need to get it, or they need to not be with us because it's so important, right? We do not have any interest in unifying with irrelevant forces. We do have interest in winning over the masses of people. And that requires doing everything we can to look and act completely different and look and act like real communist movements around the world that have actually been successful, right? And that's what I've been trying to tell people. When I go to international communist gatherings, when I'm at the World Youth Festival and all that, I see real communist groups and the way real communist groups act. And they always look at American communists and say, why are you guys so weird? Why don't you act the way we do? And they're absolutely right to say that because it doesn't make any damn sense why American communists go out of their way to offend the American people, go out of their way to be fringe. It doesn't make any goddamn sense.